welcome to All the Things. I am Monique Duson. And this is the show where we talk about all the things related to God, the Bible, and real life. What's up?
Well, this is it's getting warmer here in Southern California. I
I don't want to
know
hear about your warmth. I
it's a
don't want to
little
hear about it
warmer
at
there
all.
in Phoenix.
I literally live under the devil's big toenail. Like I don't even know what to say. I got up this morning.
You like the heat.
I do, but at 5 o'clock in the morning, it was already almost 80 degrees. It
You
might have been
didn't
a
go
little bit
out on a
over.
bike ride at five
I
in the
sure
morning.
did. I sure did. I went for my normal walk because girl, I'm getting older. I can't be having things just
Falling apart.
absolutely not. Girl, fall apart and jiggle left and right. I can't be looking like Jello. Mm-mm. Anyway, that's my story this morning. Sorry to ramble about the heat. How are you doing?
Well, days are plugging along. June's already almost half over, and we're going through our mid-year campaign. Maybe it'd be good for us to take a quick minute to talk about what we're trying to do in um, challenging people during the month of June to um, for people to prayerfully consider maybe doing $100 a month. If they've already been supporting us, maybe upping that commitment if they haven't yet come on board to do that at the $100 level. We're trying to get 30 new supporters at the $100 level.
That is true. We just ask that you prayerfully consider supporting us. And you know what? If you don't feel like praying about it, you just want to jump on in. Look, I support your vision as well. Okay. Come along and support the Center for Biblical Unity and support the conversations that we are having regarding race, justice, and unity. Support the work that we're doing in regards to things like the race statement and our Ambassadors for Biblical Justice program. Your support literally goes to keep us in full-time ministry. And we are very, very grateful for that. It also goes to support conversations like we're having today. And so I can't wait for this conversation. Sister Faust, as I like to call her, she is just she's one of a kind.
She
I will
is.
say that she is one of a kind, and I am grateful for every conversation that I get to have with her on screen or off, because she's always just real. Like it's the same.
Well, the thing about Katy Faust is that, and first of all, I think you guys just have such a great story, but uh, she's not
That's funny.
afraid. She won't back down, not even to you. And
So
she,
if
she,
people don't know what we're talking about, when I first read Them Before Us, I remember we were all at a women in apologetics conference together,
we were in the green
and
room. Yeah.
we were in the green room, and I had started Them Before Us, and somebody else was talking about it, and they were like, "This is such a good book," and I was like, "The heck?" I wasn't on board with it. I didn't like it. I didn't like the premise that she was coming from. I kind of felt like, why is she in my business? Why are you living in my uterus and what I do with my body? And for those of you who don't know, because of just the way that I had lived my life for so long, I was like, you know what? Rather than being married, I would love to just go through surrogacy or do in vitro fertilization and just have a baby. And then I can just, me and my baby, we can just rock with it and have a good life. And so when I read this book, it was just in your face of like, yeah, no, not if you care about kids. And I was like, I love kids. And who is this woman? And so I remember, I think I might have been talking to Hillary Ferrer, and she, I think, said, "Oh, you should talk to Katy directly." And I was like, okay. And I remember, I don't even know how we started the conversation, but I was just like, I don't like your book. Like, it was it was pretty much like that.
That
And she
was
was like,
probably
okay.
the opening.
It might have been. And she was like, okay, let's talk about it. And we talked about it. And by the time we were done, I was like, I can't stand this lady. Why? Why? She got like her layout and her approach to it was so just clear. And I appreciate the clarity. She was very compassionate, but compassion or not, like she was really clear. And I just appreciated that. And so yeah,
Yeah.
that was
Well,
that was it.
well, she is relentless on X with pushing children's rights to their biological mother and father. And that's what we are going to talk about today. We're having her back on the show. We're going to talk about her new campaign, the Greater Than campaign, and we are officially part of her effort. So, whatever is happening the next time a progressive is elected, we're all going to be in it together
Oh yeah.
because we are on the website
Oh yeah.
and they will come for all of us. But we thought it would be good to have Katy on to talk about the Greater Than campaign and what it's all about. So,
Yes.
let's get her on here. Welcome back, Katy.
Good to be with you. Before we do anything else, I want to say all of you guys should give $100 to this ministry.
Thanks.
Okay. And I'm going to say that because you probably know, but if you don't, there is nobody else you can trust on topics of race as it relates to fidelity to scripture, but also understanding like the lay of the land and what's happening on the ground. And like when I read the race statement recently, I was like, do we need 17 pages? I don't know how long it was, but it was like a long, long document. But I was like, you know what they did is they made this so comprehensive. You are not able to turn to the left or to the right. There's no daylight in here for somebody to slip in a little bit of biblical compromise here. And I mean, it must have been the work of, I don't know how long it took you guys, but you must have had so many trustworthy theologians speaking into it. And because I've written a couple statements and a few books, like I know what it takes to isolate just the right language to get something like that exactly right. And those kinds of things, like it really can offer guidance. You want to talk clarity? There's so much confusion on issues of race, even within the church, when there should be none. None. We have the answers. We have the beauty. We have the unity. And wolves are slipping in to try to confuse all of us. So there isn't any other organization like the Center for Biblical Unity that is speaking into this and so many other issues. If you're listening to this, you should support them. If you're subscribed, you should support them, right? They're creating content that you obviously value. And these kinds of things, they don't fund themselves. And I've been in a place where I'm doing this like on the side, or like I'm trying to piece it together with volunteers. That's a great way to go nowhere.
Mhm.
You have to have funds dedicated to have like excellent audio, to have a social media team. All of us need security these days. So I just want to say, if you really benefit from these guys and you're not financially supporting them, you can pray about it, but the answer is do it.
Thanks.
Wow, thank you.
Yes, I appreciate that. Okay, so but wait, before we even get into anything else, do you remember this conversation in
Yes,
Florida? Yeah,
I do remember.
I am very grateful.
Well, and you were so honest, but really introspective. You know, like the way that you said, I don't like this, but what do I need to know? And I tell people that the hardest, the thing that stops all of my work in its tracks, the biggest force that I come up against in my work to make sure that the words mother and father still appear in parentage law, and to make sure that children have a right to be known and loved by both people responsible for their existence as it relates to divorce or reproductive technologies, or as it relates to children not being bought and sold. Like almost everybody can get on board with all of that, unless it runs into their own self-interest. That is the place where things get very, very sticky. In principle, sure, kids need a mom and dad. But if it means that I have to stick it out in my marriage that's struggling when I'm so frustrated with my husband because he doesn't see my unseen mental load, and there's this guy at the gym that actually really gets me,
Hmm.
like that's when you run into really difficult challenges, is when this idea that children need, deserve, and have a right to their own mother and father gets in the way between something that an adult wants and what their children need. And you
Hmm.
didn't do that, Monique. You said, this is what I want. I'm heading towards it. But then you wrestled through some of the realities and you were really introspective and thoughtful about it. I mean, not everybody responds that way when they are faced with something that, in essence, says your dreams or your gifts or your longings need to be redirected.
Hmm.
And, so it was a real mark of maturity, I think.
Thanks. One of the things that I'm going to ask you about later is the testimonies from the
Mhm.
from some of the people that you have on your website. And I think, our conversation was one thing, but as I read and I listened to it too, there was just something about even the testimonies You know, that there's data. What I love about you and your books and things like that is that you come with research, you come with the data, you come with a lot of natural law stuff. Like, hey, look, we're going to tackle this from all sides. And here is the real world impact. Here's the testimony. Here's the person who actually is the byproduct of, not having access to both mother and father, or being robbed. I'll say that, being robbed of that access. And so, yeah, there was a lot to go into it. But let's jump in. And, I would say that the majority of our audience is very familiar with you, with Them Before Us, but not so familiar with Greater Than. And so, can you please just tell us a little bit about Greater Than? You can tell us as much as you want, girl. This is your show. Go ahead. About Greater Than. And, you can reintroduce us to Them Before Us if you like. But yeah, let's really talk about Greater Than.
Yep. Them Before Us is my nonprofit, and we seek to put them, the children, before us, the adult, in every matter of marriage and family. So if it's the definition of marriage, if it's talking about no-fault divorce, if it's modern families, same-sex headed households, if it's sperm and egg donation, IVF, surrogacy, even adoption, cohabitation, consensual non-monogamy, who goes on a birth certificate, how do we define parentage? If it has to do with marriage and family, what we're going to do at Them Before Us is we're going to say the kids come first. First, we need to recognize children's rights and their needs, and then all adults, single, married, gay, straight, fertile, and infertile, must conform to those fundamental rights, because the only alternative is for children to sacrifice for the adults, and that's an injustice. So we are one of the most public-facing organizations critiquing IVF because of the massive amounts of embryonic loss that goes into that, and because up to 2/3 of the children that are born alive will lose their mother or father or both in the process. So we are pretty big in the reproductive technology space. We've critiqued no-fault divorce. We'll support different state level policies that are working to roll that back and lean into what sociologist Brad Wilcox calls divorce justice. We understand there's times where a divorce may need to take place, but it cannot be the sake of the adult who wants the marriage the least having the most amount of power in the proceeding and then sticking the kids with the bill. So we will go anywhere that the threats to children go. But one of the greatest legal threats to children is the redefinition of marriage. That happened 11 years ago. Several states had passed that leading up to the Obergefell decision in 2015. But that was the point where 5 Supreme Court justices mandated gay marriage all across the country. And some of us leading up to that decision had warned, hey, this isn't just about insurance benefits for gay adults. This isn't just about hospital visitation rights. If you redefine marriage, you will redefine parentage. If you make husbands and wives optional in marriage, mothers and fathers will become optional in parenthood. Now, the problem is that for children, their mother or father are never optional. They always suffer. They always have diminished outcomes. They always long to know their missing mother and father when they grow up apart from their mom or dad. They very often will internalize that missing parent, and it will result in something like self-loathing. The impact on children when they're being raised apart from their mother or father is significant. So we now have 11 years of receipts. We have 11 years of watching the law, parenthood law especially, orient itself away from the reality that children come from a man and woman and reorient itself around adult validation, because that's what Obergefell was. It was the validation of gay adult identity, desires, and fulfillment. And so now parenthood has followed suit. So we have seen a radical overhaul in how we understand the nature of the family, the parent-child relationship, and even the nature of the human child as a result of Obergefell. And so our nonprofit, Center for Biblical Unity, and about 100 others. We're about to update our website to show all of the different organizations and leaders have arisen and said no more. We're going to retake marriage. It is not a tool of validation for any adult, not gay adults, not straight adults. This is the most effective mechanism we have ever found for child protection, child development, and child flourishing. And we're going to retake it on behalf of kids.
I think that if I'm honest, in 2015, I remember vividly exactly where I was when I heard about the Obergefell decision. And my thought was, well, maybe that'll make the gay thing kind of settle down. You know, we gave a marriage. I think I was a little bit more libertarian leaning at that time, and I was a little bit more live and let live. I wasn't podcasting about social issues the way that I am now. I was just kind of doing straight Bible teaching, not really thinking about public engagement and all of those questions. And I thought, you know, this is about legal benefits. And that I bought into a lot of that thinking. But what I've learned from you is that we actually agreed to a lot of things that we didn't know about.
Right.
And I think that your effort has helped to highlight that, that when you co-sign on gay marriage, you're co-signing on some other things that has impacts for children. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Well, you may have seen the poll numbers that came out about 2 weeks ago, the Gallup poll that showed that support for gay marriage among Republicans has dropped from a high of about 56% in 2022-23 down to 37% now. And I wrote about that at the Federalist, and I think the headline said something like, Republicans support gay marriage when they thought that it was about loving their gay friends. But when it turned out that supporting gay marriage meant children were motherless and fatherless, we stopped supporting gay marriage. And I think that that's it. Like the other side successfully build the redefinition of marriage as the sole metric for whether or not you actually care about the gay people in your life. And that was really effective. You know, like they absolutely, I think, really emotionally manipulated Christians, conservatives, Republicans into saying, it doesn't matter if you're bringing them soup when they're sick. It doesn't matter if you're caring for them while they're dying of AIDS. If you don't support gay marriage, you don't actually love your gay family and friends. And we believed them. And then they told us, well, you know, whatever happens in the privacy of two adults' bedroom, like that's not your business. And marriage isn't about children. There's lots of infertile couples that are married and they get to be, you know, have their relationship validated. And we just bought it. But it became very clear over the last 11 years that, like you said, Krista, things did not settle down. It amped up. We saw number one, you know, the most direct connection was the redefinition of parenthood to deliver to gay couples children that were intentionally motherless and fatherless. But then we also saw the transgender craze. Like 2015, Obergefell, that was in June. In July, Bruce Jenner was on the cover of Vanity Fair, right? The trans madness began right after that. And now you see drastic support cratering for transgenderism among the left and the right. And you see people, you know, what some people might call the reasonable gays, people like Andrew Sullivan, you know, or Jamie Mitchell, who runs Gays Against Groomers, saying, "Look, we don't like the trans. They're crazy. We don't believe that men should be in women's locker rooms. I don't think that we should trans the kids. So we need to separate the LG and the B from the T and the Q. We want a divorce." They want a divorce, and they'll say that, you know, we didn't do that, and the answer is, of course you did.
Mm-hmm.
Of course you did. You don't get T and Q without LGB. Specifically, you don't get T and Q without gay marriage. Why is that? Because the place where sex differences matter most is when it comes to making babies. And that's the reason why government has an interest in marriage at all. So if gender doesn't matter in marriage, it doesn't matter in the swimming pool. It does not matter on the track and the field. It doesn't matter in the locker rooms or the changing rooms or the women's prisons or the women's homeless shelters. If marriage is just genderless, then everything can be genderless. So you see the reasonable gays trying to walk this back and say, we want to stop the stream, like it's gone too far. Come all the way up, but don't touch marriage. We want to keep that. And the answer is, look, if sex distinctions matter, you got to keep going upstream and say, they really matter in marriage because that's how we make babies. And those sex differences benefit babies all their life.
Hmm. Wow, that's so good. You know, when I was listening to Krista, beginning to ask that question and talk about, like, you know, I was more libertarian and I was, you know, wasn't really thinking about, you know, what are all of the implications for, you know, going along with it or not really speaking out about it. You know, I think back to my time in 2015 and just being like, yes, it is about time. Like, why are we all in these people's beds and bedrooms?
Mm.
And I look back now and I'm just like, man, like how far off was I? And thank God for grace and mercy. But, like there's just so many different angles that we come from, and we can look at the implications in society of, we signed off on this, and then you have Bruce Jenner. We sign off on this, and now we have men participating in women's sports or being in the locker rooms and bathrooms and things like that. But can you kind of build like a through line for us, of what signing off on gay marriage really means, specifically just for kids? Like, yeah, we've talked about, well, then someone is going to miss out on a parent, possibly both. But what are some of the other implications for kids?
Okay, good. So I'll walk you through a little bit of a sequence here. 2015, gay marriage is legalized. What is it that Justice Kennedy, who wrote the governing opinion, says about what this means for gay couples? It says that same sex and opposite sex couples need to be afforded the same constellation of benefits that go along with marriage. Well, a lot of people are thinking, well, tax breaks, okay, there's a constellation of benefits. But really, the primary thing that marriage is connected to is parentage law. So you get 2015, where they pass a definition of marriage that is objectively disconnected from procreation. You can't get gay marriage if you say children are at the center of this union. So they pass gay marriage and they say marriage has nothing to do with children. And they turn around and say, now that we have marriage, give us children. So in 2017, there is a case that goes before the court in Arkansas where two women want to be listed on the child's birth certificate. Now, what did they do and what did they want? So there is something in American jurisprudence. There's something in our common law that goes back 400 years, like pre-colony time, where we have something called the presumption of paternity. That is that when a woman gives birth to a baby, the law presumes that her husband is the father of the child. That is true in almost 100% of cases. But back before there were DNA tests, right, that was the way that they used to connect father to baby. Mother is always connected to baby.
Mm-hmm.
How did you connect father to baby? Because the baby needs mother and the baby needs father. And so we had something called the presumption of paternity. If you were married to the mother, it was presumed that that was your child. And then there would be support, right, in that triangle of mother, father, child. The incredible thing is that united children to both parents in almost 100% of cases. So in the wake of Obergefell, this couple, actually there were two different lesbian couples that came before the courts and said, hey, this is discrimination because they get the presumption of paternity. When she is married to him, you presume that he is the father of the child and he gets full parental rights right away and he can go on the birth certificate. Well, Justice Kennedy said we can have the full constellation of benefits. So that presumption of paternity is now a presumption of parentage. So now if the wife is married to another woman, that woman is now regarded as the parents of the child. So what they've done is they've taken a principle that used to unite a child to both parents and inverted it. And now they use that very principle to separate children from one of their parents in every single case. That same year, the Uniform Law Commission, which is sort of a group of lawyers that puts together legal recommendations that different states can take up, they started to revise what they call the Uniform Parentage Act. This is a way to sort of streamline your parentage code to make sure that it is up to date. Okay. So they took this, what was a pre-existing parentage act, and they said, we're going to update it because now we've got gay marriage. So what do those updates require? In the name of Obergefell, what does it require? Stripping all gendered terms out of parentage laws, right? You can't say mother and father. You can't say husband and wife. You can't say man and woman. That's discriminatory. So they scrub it. It's all guardians. It's all parent one, parent two. But here's the other problem. Parentage used to recognize parental rights through only two means: a biological connection, or if you're not biologically related, you undergo significant screening and vetting and background checks and home studies and fingerprints to ensure that when you take that baby home from the hospital, you're going to love and care for it as if the child had been born to you. But under Obergefell, you have to afford them the full constellation of benefits. And both of those processes discriminate against same-sex couples because they can never both be biologically related and they'll always have to go through an adoption process. So they've created new pathways for same-sex couples or really any unrelated adult to take vulnerable infants home, even if they're not genetically related and even if they've never gone through an adoption screening. That's called intent-based parentage. And the Uniform Parentage Act also validates, in fact, it applies full state force to adults who have purchased sperm or egg or rented wombs and said, if you are paying a genetic parent or a birth mother to relinquish their parental rights to you, you get that baby. So
Wow.
in the world of adoption, we call that trafficking. When
Hmm.
you pay a genetic parent to relinquish their parental rights and hand over custody to you, that's not adoption, that's trafficking. So that's what the Uniform Parentage did. It erased mother and father. It created new pathways for adults to acquire children, even if they're foreign nationals, even if they're pedophiles, even if it's a 68-year-old single retiree. If you make the baby, you get the baby. And then it endorsed the payment of, in essence, purchasing genetic mothers and fathers and birth mothers in the name of parentage. So that's what the Uniform Parentage Act did. And after that, state after state after state has begun to pass it and ratify it. We have almost a dozen that have done it at this point. And if you have not seen it in your state, you guys, California already did it. We already did it. But if it hasn't come to your state, it will, because that is what gay marriage requires. You got to finish the job. It's not enough to just say that adults can marry. They have to have equal access to other people's children without anything encumbering them.
I'm so glad you laid all that out. We're going to play a quick video clip just to illustrate what it is that you're talking about.
Hmm.
This is most recently a bill in the state of New York that's passed both houses in their legislature that would remove the words mother and father from family court law. Let's check it out.
A new bill advancing its way in the New York State Legislature has many people scratching their heads tonight.
It all has to do with replacing the words mother and father with gender neutral terms. Morgan Mackay is here to break it all down. So what are we talking about, Morgan?
Hey, Steve, Natasha. So the bill actually passed both houses of the state legislature, and now it awaits Governor Kathy Hochul's signature if she decides to sign it. But the bill passed so fast and with no debate that several lawmakers were privately shocked when they learned it passed both the Senate and Assembly. If Hochul signs a bill, the words mother and father will be removed from family court law and replaced with gender-neutral terms. Mother would be replaced with gestating parent, and father would be replaced with non-gestating parent. The bill's memo argues that this new language is more inclusive, and it takes into account that a biological parent doesn't always mean that they are an actual mother or father in a child's life. For example, if a child is adopted or born from a surrogate. But critics of the bill argue that this change is unnecessary, especially when lawmakers only have one more day left of the legislative session before they leave Albany for the rest of the year. Republican Assembly Minority Leader Ed Raw weighs in. And we also asked Governor Hochul if she will sign the bill, but she avoided answering directly.
We don't think it does anything to make New York more affordable on a permanent basis. And that's what New Yorkers are talking about. That's what they care about. They want to know what we're doing to make their lives more affordable.
I'm not familiar with what was introduced late last night, so I'll take a look at it. But I have until the end of the year to review them and make a decision. So I won't be commenting on pending legislation.
Now, we also reached out to the sponsors of the bill in both houses for an interview or even a comment, and they declined.
So there you have it. I mean, the response of like, well, this isn't about helping people live more affordable lives. It's like, well, where's the strong response of this is separating children from their parents? Like, that's the kind of energy I want to see in the public square from our politicians. But this is how we got here. It was Obergefell, and then that it is the first step in the series of dominoes that we're now in. I think that we've got to talk about your effort of what it is that you want to do to begin to undermine Obergefell or get the Supreme Court to reconsider it.
Yeah, there was like, if you're on X especially, there was just absolute outrage. All the major accounts. I can't believe New York's doing this. What is Kathy Hochul up to? And I'm like, Kathy Hochul didn't do this. Gay marriage did this.
Mhm.
right? And like this is actually just an update to their Uniform Parentage Act. They passed the Uniform Parentage Act in 2021. And so they created all these gender neutral terms. They created access to unrelated children through these commercial processes. They did it in 2021. They already scrubbed mother and father from that parenthood statute. Now they're just universalizing it for the rest of the law because otherwise, you've got kind of a schizophrenia. You've got mother and father over here. You've got non-gestating parent over here. You've got parents and guardians over here. So it's like, don't get pissed off at the Democrats and at Kathy Hochul. Get pissed off at gay marriage. Gay marriage always leads to this. It always leads to this. So what do you have to do? You have to go upstream. It's not enough to just say, you keep that mother and father in parenthood statutes. Go all the way up to the source and say, we cannot ratify a union. What is it that gay marriage really did? It prohibited states from elevating the one family form where children don't have to lose their mother or father to be in it. It says that form of family where children are united to the two people who gave them life. It's just like every other family arrangement. It's just like the Chinese couple that's mass producing, children in Arcadia, California. It's just like the single 68-year-old guy that creates two IVF children through surrogates and, keeps them in a cage in his upstairs loft, also in California. It's just like the two men, one of which is a convicted pedophile who had been, indicted for sexting a 16-year-old boy 10 years ago. All these families are the same. And to say different makes you a bigot. So you have to go all the way upstream. And you have to say, look, equivocating two things that for the children are never going to be the same is the problem. I understand that not everybody is going to meet the ideal of a married mother-father home that stays together for life. But when we pretend like there isn't an ideal, then what happens is you no longer have any kind of recognition of those natural family bonds that obviously protects children, protects them in terms of their safety, their identity, their development. So that is the proper understanding of the natural family. What Obergefell creates is a state constructed family, not where there's a natural relationship between parent and child, the kind of thing that has been recognized through things like the presumption of paternity, the kind of relationship that has been protected by the Supreme Court for the last 100 years when it comes to parental rights. No, none of that matters. Now you get a new model of the family called the state constructed family, where the state gets to assign strangers to be mother and father or father and father to children. So continue to be horrified when states call mothers gestating parents, but do something other than being horrified. Like take action, go back to the source, and we need to start telling the truth about marriage and children again.
When I hear the redefinition of mother and father and gestating parent and all of those things, it really makes me wonder how long we have before they redefine what it means to be a child. There's a lot of conversations already happening on, what is childhood, and childhood is
Mhm.
just a social construct, and children should have the right to vote. Children should have the right to choose their partners, their sexual partners at earlier ages, and all of these things. And so I don't know the more you speak on this, the more I continually ask, like, pretty soon they're not going to be satisfied with what it means to be mother and father, or what a definition of marriage is. It's going to be a redefinition of children. And I don't know if you see that or if you want to say more to that, but that's kind of what I am picking up on the horizon.
I think that there's a huge risk of that, just in terms of that critical theory mood that sees children as items that need to be liberated from their parents.
Mhm.
That's 100% true. But we actually have already seen the redefinition of the human child. We used to know that children were born into a pre-political relationship with their mom and dad, right? We
Mhm.
used to have laws that say that mother and baby belong together, for example. Even if there was an adoption plan that had been made, no state allowed the mother to relinquish her parental rights before the baby was born, right? The state presumed that those two things go together. She
Mhm.
has a claim to the baby, and the baby has a claim to her. So,
Mhm.
under things like the Uniform Parentage Act, if you have commissioned a woman to rent her body out, she is presumed to be the mother. But now you can do something called a pre-birth order, where she can relinquish her parental rights in the second or third trimester. So again, in under this sort of Obergefell rubric, the law no longer presumes that mother and baby go together. So what does
Yeah.
that mean? What does that mean when you are now ratifying by power of the force of the state, that people can purchase sperm and egg and rent womb and take home any child. It really reduces children to sort of a widget that can be assembled, right?
Hmm.
Maybe the egg is going to come from a Filipino woman. And the truth is, maybe she was trafficked and they took her eggs by force. Maybe the sperm is going to come from a guy in Spain. You're going to rent the womb of a woman in Mexico because it's cheaper than a Californian surrogate. And two men are going to take the baby home to Indiana. I mean, you have a global baby assembly process. And in that sense, you really are redefining what it means to be a human child. It's not a child that is born into a, an embedded relationship. It is an object to be assembled and then awarded to whatever adult has the money and means to acquire them. And so I
Wow.
think that we're already in the place. I don't think we are already in the place where children are not regarded as vulnerable humans with inherent rights to life and right to their mother and father.
Hmm.
They are products to be assembled and purchased if you happen to be in one of these states that have already redefined parentage in the name of adult civil rights.
Wow.
So there's so much rhetoric online about, well, all a child needs really is two loving parents. And they take issue with your position that no, a child's best interest is to have the biological mother and father, that this is the natural way, and that gay parenting doesn't happen. You are constantly saying that on X, that those are two people that did something that outside of the bonds of that relationship, because gay parenting is impossible and from a natural point of view. But you are constantly hitting this theme of no, it's more than just two loving parents. And on your website, you have so many testimonies of children. Many of them were raised by two loving people, but they still have a father hunger, a mother hunger. Maybe you can speak to that a little bit.
We just debuted a video. If you go to greaterthancampaign.com, subscribe so that you can get our updates. But if you go to the homepage now, we've got sort of a Father's Day edition that's up. And if you scroll up, you might see it. It is Ross. So Ross shares his story. He was raised by two mothers. He is the product of sperm donation. And he just shares his story about how he hungered for a dad. And he even says, which is a common objection that I get in my work. Well, like, yeah, but like, what if one woman takes on the more masculine role? I mean, like most of the same-sex couples I know, there's sort of a butch mom and there's a femme mom. Or, the male couples that I know, one, wears aprons and kind of flutters around the house and he's just really good at doing hair. And I mean, so isn't that enough? And so Ross addresses that. He says, look, I had food in my belly, I had a roof over my head. I had one mom that was much more taking on the feminine role, like picking us up from school and taking us to all of our sports events. And then my biological mom, she took on the more masculine role and she like brought home the bacon and she had a buzz cut and she just looked really masculine. And he said, but it was a shell. She looked masculine on the outside, but on the inside, she was a woman. I was raised just by two very feminine women. And I hungered for masculine love. And he shares these stories of how he didn't even know how to articulate. A lot of these kids, they have a sense that they're sad or they've they're struggling or they need something, but they can't put it into words. And a lot of the reasons why they can't put it into words is because a lot of the kids that are raised in the gay community, all they hear is you're so lucky. You're so lucky to have two moms. You're so lucky to have two fathers. Man, if I had a mother and father, but they didn't love me the way your two fathers love you. And so these kids grow up like every other child, longing to be known and loved by a mother and father, but hearing that they should be happy with their two mothers. And what it does is it generates this incredible sense of guilt, right? It's interesting. Watch Ross's story because he had the best case scenario. Like he was raised from birth by two mothers. There was no divorce, there was no breakdown. He was well loved, there was no abuse, and he hungered for male love.
Hmm.
And it's interesting. I think it was an Arizona women's basketball coach that announced the week before last that she and her wife were pregnant with their second child. And I quote tweeted it and I said, I've talked to hundreds of children with same-sex parents. Let me tell you what this child is likely going to struggle with. I described the father hunger. I described the identity issues that a lot of donor conceived children experience. I talked about how they likely will feel guilty for wanting a father because the community says that they should be happy with two mothers. And at the end, I said, and this is why we have to overturn Obergefell.
Mhm.
So then Becky comes back with a statement, something like, oh, we don't need you to validate our happiness. And a lot of people accused me of attacking her and degrading her children by that statement that I made. So she comes back and says, we don't need your validation. Our happiness doesn't need your validation. I believe in representation. I need to make sure that I am representing my community. And I quote tweeted that.
Katy,
And I
Katy, you
said,
really started something. I was watching watching that unfold. You really started something there.
yeah, it was a thing. It was a thing. But I said, oh, representation matters, does it? Hey, here's a quote of a child with two mothers. She never sees herself represented in film. When she looks at TV and when she watches movies, she looks at all of the good kids with same-sex parents who love having two mothers and love having two fathers. And she says, what's wrong with me? She says, I feel like a terrible bitch because I don't love having two mothers or two fathers. And I said, does she ever get representation? Where's her
Mhm.
representation? And they never get represented, right? Only the adults and what they want, they get representation, not the kids who are suffering.
One of the things that I noticed, I think it's a clear distinction between like your book and on the website, and it's that the testimonies of the kids aren't angry. It's not like they're, burn it all down, but there is this continual like theme of sadness, like this
Yes.
grief. And I really think that distinction is important because as you say, like, well, there isn't the representation, there isn't the, hey, what about this story over here where, so many kids get left out. I'm wondering if you can help us understand the distinction, and why it's important, like the anger and between anger and this grief and sadness, because it also, to me, kind of links into another area of like when people say, well, it's just like being in an interracial, marriage where they're not the same, like these people don't match, or there's this supposed stark difference when people are in interracial relationships that many people often want to parallel to gay marriage. Does
Mhm.
that make sense?
Oh,
And
yeah.
so I'm wondering like where you think that comparison gets it wrong. So I'm
Mhm.
asking two questions, and I probably shouldn't. I should probably just stick with one. But it's just all formulated in kind of, at the same
Yep.
time as I'm going through.
So,
Sorry about that.
no, obviously, this is a huge scare tactic that the left uses when they say, oh, you're coming for Obergefell. Interracial marriage is going to be next. No, no. Okay, no. No, these are two totally different things. Legally, they were actually decided on two different bases. And so you can look at the shaky basis on which the Supreme Court decided Obergefell, and it's a totally different legal reasoning. So it's like even there, they're worlds apart. But from the child's perspective, these are two completely different things. So, first of all, barriers to interracial marriage are new. We typically have not had miscegenation laws throughout the country, and only part of the country had it, right? That actually was an introduction of a barrier that did not previously exist. So what did we do during Loving versus Virginia? We just removed the barrier that had been temporarily erected. Number two, why did people put that barrier up? It wasn't because they didn't think men and women of different races could get married. They didn't want mixed race babies. They actually knew that marriage was about children. And so they wanted to prevent children from two different races being made. So, from the child's perspective, these two things do exactly opposite as it relates to what it is that children need. A child that is raised by her Black father and her white mother have maternal and paternal love, total access to both kinship networks, the answer to the question, who am I? Because they know whose am I? And they never have to suffer any kind of maternal or paternal loss through death, divorce, abandonment, or reproductive technologies. You look at the child who is being raised by a black father and a white father, and what do you have there? You have children that are cut off from at least half of their kinship network. They have at least half of the answer to who am I completely removed. They will be starved of maternal love, and they always will have suffered the trauma of mother loss through death, divorce, abandonment, or reproductive technology / surrogacy. So from the child's perspective, the child gains everything through interracial marriage and loses everything through same-sex marriage. So everybody trying to make some kind of comparison judicially just don't understand the reasoning. But second of all, like from the child's perspective, these two things are worlds apart.
Oh, you're muted.
I said sorry, hold on. Sorry. I was totally muted because I was gonna sneeze and I didn't want to interrupt everyone. Sorry about that, friends. I think you hit on some really good points. Just in, these two comparisons are not the same. It's completely different conversation. One is, keeping the child as having like the right to their mother and father, where the other one still strips away one or two parents from the child. As we are rounding out and thinking about, the person in our community, whether it's someone in our family, someone who sits in church next to us, or maybe it's somebody that we work alongside that is in support of gay marriage, that might be struggling with the idea of their own homosexuality and wanting to adopt. Or it might be the person who was like me, who is like, hey, look, I'm in my late 30s and I really want to have a kid, but I'm single. And I think, IVF may be the way for me. What is your either word to them, like your thought to them, and encouragement to them, or maybe an admonishment to them? How would you encourage us as believers to have these conversations with those in our lives who are considering these very real things?
If you're talking to somebody that believes that scripture is their authority, what you need to communicate is in the Old Testament and the New Testament and all throughout history, Christians are charged with child protection. It is and always has been one of the primary manifestations of our pure and undefiled religion before God. That, in the Old Testament, you've got 36 verses that talks about protecting the fatherless specifically. What is it that's going on in the world of marriage and family today? It is not protection of the fatherless. It is the manufacturing of the fatherless and the manufacturing of the motherless. Like mother loss is so new to our species. Scripture doesn't talk about motherless children because it used to be that if the baby lost the mother, the baby would die, right? That's how closely connected mother and baby are. But now through our ability to splice mother into 3 purchasable and optional components through surrogacy and egg selling, now we are able to make motherless children by design. I mean, it's so foreign to our species. And so Christians don't do that. We don't victimize children by denying them their mother and father. We protect children. We don't stand by while they're manufactured. We don't stand by while the words mother and father are scrubbed from our parentage laws, because what you cannot name, you can never defend. So we have got to be the people that are standing for children. This is what Christians have done throughout history. You can look at, we all revere Amy Carmichael because she snatched the kids out of the sexual prostitution temples in the name of idol worship. We look at the myriad Christians throughout globe who have been started orphanages for unwanted children. We look at the different British Christians that instituted child labor laws during the Victorian era to make sure that street kids were not working in factories for 14 hours a day. We marvel at the Chinese missionaries who virtually put an end to Chinese foot binding because they recognized that it was such a grotesque practice, and they undermined it by providing great educations to girls, but only if they had naturally born feet. Like, we look at how Christians have intervened in a variety of different ways that the culture was seeking to victimize them. And the cultural threats to children have changed depending on the century, depending on the country. The Christian response never changes. We always do 2 things. We anger adults so that children are protected. That's always how it goes. So this is your opportunity to step into the great cloud of witnesses. You can do that while compassionately talking with your friend who's struggling with infertility, or when your cousin, your gay cousin comes to you and says, I so desperately want to be a father. You can do it with your friends who are struggling in marriage. Um, and you should empathize with them and you should bear their burden. But no amount of adult longing, loss, suffering, or desire ever justifies violating children's right to life or right to their mother and father. There just comes a time, and honestly, every adult at some point has to make the decision. Is it going to be the kid or is it going to be me?
Mhm.
Who is going to do the hard thing? Like we didn't deal with infertility. We have gone through rough patches in our marriage, but never questioned and considered divorce. But there was a time where God said, do you love me? I was like, of course I love you, Lord. And he said, go adopt this child. And I said, oh, no, 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 no. I am very tired. I have these 3 young children and adoption scares me. I know how hard that is, especially I know you want us to get an older special need child. I know that that is not a quick and easy solve. I know it's redemptive, but I did not want to do that. God told us to, and um, it's the hardest thing we've ever gone through.
Mhm.
Obviously, really hard on our son, who went through 2 years of institutionalization and no mother. Um, and that's a really difficult adjustment when you do join a family. And it was so hard on my other children too. Like at some point, all of us have to make the decision who is going to do the hard thing. And it will either be the adults or it will be the child. And the Christian response is always the adults. That is how it is laid out in the commands of God, that the strong sacrifice for the weak. And then God himself demonstrated for that on a cosmic level when he, the strongest of all, came down and sacrificed himself for the poor and weak and the wretched for us. And he tells us to go and do likewise. So that is the word I would say for people that believe the word to be the primary authority in their life is appeal to scripture. If you're talking to somebody that doesn't believe in scripture, that doesn't consider themselves a Christian, I would just say expose them to as many stories as possible of
Mhm.
children who grew up without a mom and dad. If they are a same-sex couple that believe that kids just need caregivers, go to our website, read Them Before Us, Why We Need a Global Children's Rights Movement, and just say, hey, would you just read this chapter on same-sex parenting? There's 24 stories of kids with 2 mothers or 2 fathers that are talking about their hunger for a mother and father, the instability of their household, their identity struggles, and their guilt, the guilt that they feel because these 2 mothers don't seem to be enough for them. So the bottom line is you are God's plan A for child defense. You need to be really good at it. You need to be good at arguing from the word. And if they don't believe in the Bible, you need to be really good at arguing from the world, using the evidence from the world to talk to people about why they need to take on a posture of child protection.
Mhm. That's so good. You know, I want to ask another question. It's kind of in a different lane, but it is something that we talked about. I think I asked you about it. Maybe I didn't. But what are your thoughts about single adoption? Because I think you can put the boundaries up around like, hey, we shouldn't do IVF and we shouldn't participate in surrogacy and we shouldn't do same-sex adoption and like things like that. And but what are your thoughts on like, hey, I don't plan on getting married and I want to adopt, or I haven't been married yet and I want to adopt, where I think the need, or I don't know if the need, but there's still the longing
Yeah.
in the adult. And I mean, because there are, like you said, there are men who want to be fathers, there are women who want to be mothers, but they're not attached to the opposite sex. What are your thoughts on that?
So first, a zoom out, and you know this, so I'm just going to frame this for the audience. Adoption is for kids. Right? Adoption is not a way for same-sex couples to complete their family. Adoption is not a way for infertile couples to have children. Adoption is for children. Adoption is a way a just society responds to children who have lost their parent. The adults may pay some adoption fees, but they are not the client. If adoption goes the way it should go, not every adult who wants a baby is going to get a baby, but every child that needs to be placed in a loving home will be brought into the home of a mother and a father. Okay. So that is the ideal. The ideal is that we want to, as much as possible, replicate what the child has lost, which is safe, loving moms and dads married to each other for life. That's the ideal. Now, when you're talking about white drug-free infants, you've got years of waiting lists for those kids.
Mm-hmm.
When you're talking about children with special needs, maybe drug addicted babies, sibling groups, older children, kids in foster care, there are not enough married mother and father homes for those kids. And so very often social workers have to make the placement that is in the best interest of the child. And sometimes that might be a single mother or a single father. Maybe they're in a position to handle the child's special needs. Maybe they are the people that are just willing to take on a difficult case. So in those situations, I think that there can certainly be a respite aspect of that, even if it's not a permanent placement, but maybe given a variety of factors, the social worker will determine that that is in the best interest of that child. So that's the thing about adoption is a lot of times that quote unquote ideal is not available. And sometimes a single parent might be the best placement. Now, I know single parents that have adopted foster children, and it was very hard. It was very hard. I know that, our son, he really struggled for a long, long time. He came to us when he was 2. He didn't stabilize until he was probably 12.
Hmm.
And he did not just he was very mother hungry, but he needed a father to run into those boundaries where I even started to give a little bit. All of our 4 children needed a mother and father. Our child who was starved of both might have needed it even more. And my only explanation for why he is in such a good place now is because he had both maternal and paternal love that didn't bend. And what I mean by that is he ran into lovingly enforced boundaries year after year after year after year. And I think he finally got to the place where he said, I belong and I'm okay. But I wouldn't have had the stamina to do it on my own, and my husband wouldn't have had the patience to do it on his own.
Hmm.
And I don't know if our son would be at the place he is now without maternal love or paternal love.
Hmm.
Would a single parent have been better than an orphanage in China where many of those children end up being trafficked and exploited and developmentally twisted? Yeah, absolutely. They would. But that is a woman or a man that needs to have a very robust community around them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm glad that you put it that way. And, what I hear you saying is, shouldn't be the rule. But it can be better when determined than leaving a kid in an orphanage. And but there's a lot of um things that aren't often considered when you choose to adopt. And that all has to be taken into consideration because it is a lot of work.
Yeah.
And not just, oh, I have to provide, but it's a lot of emotional work. It's just a lot. But kids are a lot. So I'm not trying to say, that we don't want to do the work and that naturally born children are not a lot of work. But it can be different. And I've watched that firsthand. And so yeah, thank you for putting that into perspective. It doesn't feel good. Like I will just acknowledge that as being a single person. Like it does not feel good. But I definitely appreciate the clarity and the honesty much more than oh yeah, you should consider it, and just kind of scratching the itch that I may have or that somebody else watching may have.
I would say you should prayerfully consider it and maybe, talk and see what kind of role, because even if it's not a permanent home, the respite, the need for respite, the need for an emergency placement That's some of the greatest needs that foster families have right now. And in a situation like that, somebody like you would be a massive blessing. You know, you could be a safe haven. And I don't know what the Lord is going to do, and I don't know what child is out there, but it is something I think to prayerfully consider.
We'll take that as a prophetic word. Okay. Well, Katy,
My
thanks
hands
for
are a little full now,
yeah.
but
Got this whole like kind of ministry thing we're doing. But thanks so much for coming on and talking about it. Once again, go get connected with Katy Faust's work at Them Before Us, as well as the Greater Than campaign, and follow her good work. And if you are on X, I'm not necessarily endorsing being on X. It is a soul-sucking place at times, but Katy is a good follow, and you can watch her shenanigans as she tries to engage with famous people about her point of view.
and I would also say remember that Katie's work is a work of justice. It is a very justice-centered work, ministry, life endeavor. And so we don't want to just think, oh, well, this is great. No, she's doing work of biblical justice to make sure that children have the right to their parents. I'm grateful for you, Katy.
I love you guys. So thankful to be partners with you in this effort and friends off camera.
That's right.
Yes, yes, yes. All
All right. Take
right.
care, Katy.
Thank
We'll
you,
see
Katy.
you soon.
Thank you guys.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Well, Monique, since you're talking about justice, we should probably say that mention that Katy is going to be part of our Ambassadors for Biblical Justice program coming in the fall. Not technically in the fall. It's in a couple of months. We'll be starting up almost exactly in 2 months from today. And we are accepting applications right now through the end of July. But Katy is a great example of kind of boots on the ground person who's doing really good work on issues of justice related to the family and centering the needs of children. And those are the kinds of conversations we're going to be having in the program. It's a 9-month virtual mentoring program. You're going to be hearing from a variety of voices who are people working in various aspects of biblical justice. And we're going to give careful definition and distinction between social justice and biblical justice. But this is our effort to raise up grassroots Christians in their own communities to think about how they can make a difference. And we don't want to just be on the internet screaming all the time against social justice. We want to instead do something positive of what will we stand for. Like Katy was saying earlier, Christians are God's plan A for protecting children. How do we do that? So I want to encourage all of you, if you want to know more information, just go to centerforbiblical.com/ambassador and find out more about the program. And if you have questions that kind of interest you, but you're not really sure, you can send me an email. We'll get on a Zoom. We'll talk about it, see if it's for you. We're not expecting everybody who goes through the program to like start their own 501c3. Like that's not what this is. But we will coach you in helping you think through how you can apply what you are learning in the program to your specific context. So all of that, go check it out. The Ambassadors for Biblical Justice. All right, Monique, do you want to have a last word?
To email for more information on the Ambassador program, please email info@centerforbiblicalunity.com. And then please remember that we are in the middle of our mid-year giving campaign. It's a time where we raise more funds to close the gap and get us through to the end of the year. You can give at centerforbiblicalunity.com. Just hit the donate button, or click on the mid-year campaign information that's located on our home screen. And if you have not already read and signed the Los Angeles Statement on Race, Justice, and Unity, authored by the Center for Biblical Unity, please do so at our website, centerforbiblicalunity.com. Make sure to share the statement. It is great for Christian institutions, ministries, churches, anyone who is really looking to be equipped on what scripture actually says about race, justice, and unity, and wanting to put up some boundaries and guardrails so that your institution does not venture off into the more secular versions of the conversations on race, justice, and unity. I think it's time for us to wrap.
Yeah, I think we will see everyone again next week. I'm looking at the schedule really quick. I think that next week we're going to kind of do a little bit of a deep dive on justice and talk a little bit more about the ambassadors program. And so we will be live. A little sketchy right now as to what the show will be about, but it'll be great. We promise.
It will be.
And then in 2 weeks, we're going to be having a new guest to the show, Ms. Bunny Pounds from Christians Engaged. And she does a lot of work to encourage Christians to be informed voters in their area. So we are going to hear about a Christian vision for public engagement. And then we're going to continue the theme of justice this season and talk to someone, Mr. Wes Fuller from End Abortion Now. We're going to be talking about abolition, which is the first time we've really talked about that subject.
Yes. I want to follow up on something that you said. You said that, join us next week because our show is going to be great. And I definitely say yes and amen. I might be a bit biased, but what makes our show so great is all of you who join us.
That's right.
And so thank you for joining us. Thank you for chiming in. Thank you for all of your kind words and being in the chat week after week. We are grateful for you guys. And, we are grateful that we are family. I think that isn't said nearly enough in the church. It's the reality that we're brothers and sisters. And I personally love coming on and hanging out with you guys for an hour, sometimes a little over, just as a way to connect as family. You guys, we are so, so grateful for you. And with that, we are out of here.
We'll see you next week.
Bye.
Grace and peace.
There's nothing left.